Panama Papers had been one of the biggest international journalistic investigation which was covering a number of governments, politicians. That was a big buzz of the last year, but we would like to know what is the follow-up, what is changing, and we're talking to Paul Radu, who is the executive head of the OCCRP project. They started with investigating corruption in the Balkans, in Eastern Europe, then in Central Asia, and now this is a really global project, but of course Paul knows a lot about our region. But starting with the Panama Papers, you know, that is a story, there is a huge success if we speak about the investigation. But now, can we speak about the results, about the impact of that? Because, you know, investigations today, they are making a lot of people kind of discouraged that, you know, all the politicians are corrupt and it leads to nowhere. Do we know about the, I don't know, any kind of things which led to something, which had brought some, you know, positive results in courts and elsewhere?
Well, you're right. I mean, Panama Papers was all about the hypes of the names involved, you know, including names in Ukraine and Russia and other countries. But really, Panama Papers is about the whole system. It's a rigged system that was used by corrupt politicians, by criminals, by controversial businessmen to actually do business, to make money in an illegal way. So that is what's changing with the Panama Papers project. So right now it's much harder for them to do business as usual. So I think that changed quite a bit. Even if people were not sent to jail, as it happened in a few other countries, in our region is harder to put people in jail, especially people in power. Although in my country, in Romania, that happens quite a lot lately for the past few years. But the thing is, you know, you gotta attack the system, and Panama Papers exposed the system in its entirety. So now it's much harder for these people to use the same mechanisms to do business. So that's very important. And don't forget, at the level of the European Union, there's an open investigation into Panama Papers. There's a group officially investigating at the level of the European Union. And out of this group, there were a few ideas that came out and that are going to become practice very soon. And one is to create a registry of beneficial ownership at the level of the EU. So no company can do business in the EU without knowing who is the real owner of the company, and that's very, very important, because that's exactly how these criminals, how these corrupt politicians and businessmen do business right now, by stealing, you know, European funds, by stealing national funds and all this. And secondly, one thing that people must understand about Panama Papers is that this is a gift that keeps on giving. I mean, Panama Papers is not over. Even we published in March of this year an investigation that we titled the Russian Laundromat. It is about more than 20 billion US dollars laundered via banks in Moldova and in Latvia, and including, you know, connections to Ukraine. A key piece of information for that investigation came from the Panama Papers database. There's a lot of information there that is not explored yet, that will be explored, you know, because journalists are working actively. So that's a place where you keep on going to get information. This is why I say it's something that will probably never stop, because some of the information in Panama Papers can become relevant later in time. And that information, coupled with other leaks, coupled with other databases, can create new investigative reporting, and it is creating new investigative reporting. In fact, we're working right now at an investigation that is, I think it's going to be quite impactful, that we're going to publish in the fall, and some of the information for this investigation comes from Panama Papers as well as from other sources.
When we talked to a lot of journalists from the region, they said that, you know, they were uncovering corruption before, and there was a high-level corruption here in Mezhyhirya, where the Ukrainian president used to live, and you know, what we knew about that place was thanks to the investigative reporters. But how their practices are changing, because what with the corrupt officials and the criminals, they adapt very fast. As soon as you found something, you put a light on it, they find new ways. So what are now new tricks besides, you know, we knew tax havens, that was the thing, but now, you know, you can dig into that. So
the thing is, I mean, even with tax havens, you know, they are still using the old tricks. There are not so many ways to to go about corruption, to do corruption, because, you know, in the end it's about stealing money from someone's pocket. That's it, you know, you're stealing money from the citizen's pocket, so it's theft, it's simple theft. You can put in between offshores, you can put, you know, better shares companies and all this, so these tricks are still used. And one of the main things here is, for instance, at the level of the European Union. Although the European Union is investigating Panama Papers and it's taking all this action against better shares and against, you know, against offshore havens, there are a few countries inside the European Union where you can create companies that ensure more secrecy than the companies that were established by Fonseca in Panama. So in my country, in Romania, there are more than 300 companies that are owned via better shares. Better shares means, you know, a piece of paper where you have 100 shares in a company. Whoever holds that piece of paper in their hand is their company. So if I give you the piece of paper, it's your company. If I put it in my pocket, it's my company, without any other documents, you know, attached to it, you know. So these are things that are ongoing right now in the EU. You know, we don't need to go to Panama Papers. We need to clean our house first, you know. And so all the politicians, dirty politicians in the EU are using these tools, you know. So outside of Panama Papers, there's a lot of work to be done. For instance, in Austria, you can establish Privatstiftungs, these private foundations that can be used, you know, in various ways. And I think actually Mezhyhirya here was owned by a company connected to a Privatstiftung, you know. So there are various tricks that are still used by, so it's still the old tricks. Now there will be new tricks, you know. So we see right now money laundering. Our latest project about the Russian laundromat, about the 20 billion laundered via banks in the EU, you know, it targeted banks because there were more than 500 banks involved in, you know, dealing with this money. And now we have Bitcoin, and Bitcoin it's still a small part of the economy, of the world economy. It's really small. But if you'll crack down on banks, and this needs to happen, you know, lots of criminals will probably move towards Bitcoin, you know. So we'll see if that's, you know, how that will go. And then we have to adapt a little bit more and to use more technology in our investigative reporting to be able to expose this stuff.